Welcome, everyone, and thank you for joining us today. I'm now going to hand over to Tony, Dr. Tony Ribbink, our CEO at SST, to give us a brief recap, and then Abdullah from the Abidjan Convention will be giving a quick introduction for Ibrahima. Thank you, everyone.
Well, thank you, Tara. And Ibrahima, welcome, and welcome to everybody else who's attending this webinar series for the Abidjan Convention on the way forward to develop national and regional action plans. It's been an exciting, very informative webinar series so far. We began by having a look at the needs and the requirements for the development of national and regional action plans. We then had a look at the upstream components of the plastics industry, particularly the role and the changes that might need to be made in terms of production, manufacturing, conversion, and this sort of thing. And then we went into the needs for the downstream aspects of recycling, not only of the plastics themselves in terms of recycling back to recycling, but also to other products, including pyrolysis. We moved on from there to examine the need for data, the science, research, the need for monitoring, the need for development of baselines, and from there to the value of education in changing human behavior. And then we began to move on to policies. And, before that, we actually had to look at the waste from sea-based sources. Everything previously to that had been land-based sources, and then we moved to sea-based sources, principally from ships, and a big focus on fishing gear. This was then followed by a movement into discussions on policies and a focus firstly on local government organizations for municipalities, which are absolutely key, because if we get the municipalities right and we get municipalities clean, we've actually got clean nations. And then on to international policies and the way in which nations can come together. And today we follow in that trend with Ibrahima's talks on basically also guidance for local government. So now, thank you very much. Over to Abdullah. Good afternoon, Abdullah. Could you kindly introduce Ibrahima?
Good afternoon, Tony. Thank you for this recap. Mesdames et messieurs, bonjour. Donc, je remercie Tony.
I want to recognize Tony and commend him for such an outstanding and a comprehensive recap of these webinars, this series of webinars that started on 2nd March with the Abidjan Convention. And as Tony rightly put it, this falls within the framework of supporting ACP-MEE with funding from the European Union and UN environment. This is the third phase, actually. And today we are privileged and honored to have Mr. Ibrahima. He is a civil engineer by training, and he holds an MBA, a higher education, a higher degree in project management and a master's in business administration. And
il prépare un doctorat aujourd'hui en sciences et technologies sur le même sujet. On peut dire qu'Ibrahima est un passionné de ces sujets qui portent sur la gestion des déchets, et que surtout il a cette patte, on va dire, cette touche du praticien.
And he is more of a professional rather than a theoretician, because Ibrahima worked several years for the local governments in Dakar and also at the central level at the ministry, at various ministries. And he also was privileged to coordinate the work on waste management in Senegal in his capacity as coordinator. We therefore gratified to have someone with such a resume, so someone that combines both the theoretical knowledge and the practical know-how in terms of waste management on a daily basis. Mr. Ibrahima Diagne, the floor is yours. We're happy to have you. Thank you for coming to share your expertise on this high-powered topic, which is of high interest for our various governments. The floor is fully yours. On behalf of our partners, I would like to say welcome and thank you. Good day, everyone. Welcome, all participants. It is indeed a huge and tremendous privilege to join you on this leg of this series of webinars that is to collate good practices for the elaboration of national action plans and the regional action plans to ensure an efficient management of waste, plastic waste in Africa, as Abulai so rightly put it. Abulai, no one could have said it better than Abulai. I had experience, I backed several years in terms of working with the local governments, and I have a treasure trove of knowledge and experience in the issues pertaining to waste management in my capacity as coordinator in my country of Senegal. This is an opportunity for me to share my humble experience, and we would like this to be an interactive session whereby we will have backs and forths, and where each one can learn from the experience of each and every one. So I'm going to articulate my paper on 4 topics. We will start with the stakes and the challenges to culminate into action plans to allow and empower the local governments and the central governments to fully play their role in terms of sustainable management of waste. Now, in terms of the background, the background is quite relevant. Of course, this is about the prevailing and overarching issue of waste management, which is a universal challenge and of peculiar relevance in Africa, especially in suburban areas. We have about 80% of collection rate, but in the other areas, usually the waste collection stands at around 30% in the West, in the best of worlds. Therefore, one of the key challenges is that our governments do not appraise the issue of waste management as a key issue in terms of waste management and with the potential impact on education and health. So we have to understand that there is a correlation. We have established in Senegal a link in terms of economic impact between waste management, and we're losing billions of CFA every year as a result of the erratic management and of waste and littering, and without mentioning the impact on health. So we want therefore to welcome and commend this initiative, which is to culminate into action plans that will enable and empower the policymakers to go the extra mile. And this situation is equal to the fact that we have inadequate infrastructure, we have inadequacy of collection equipment and machinery. And most of the time you will run into 20-year-old trucks that are devoted to collection management. And there is also the issue of erratic coordination between the actors and stakeholders that are intervening in waste management. And we also have the issue of a payroll, lack of incentives to motivate people into the waste management sector. In the absence of official mechanisms, the local governments and the communities have to foot the bill by coming together and finding ways and means to deal with the issue of waste collection and waste management. And bearing in mind that they have challenges in terms of logistics and equipment. And in addition to that, we have the issue related to behavioral challenges on the part of citizenry that dumped waste randomly in a wild manner. We also have the non-effective transfer of collection, and the governments often lack capacities and the will to properly discharge or remove waste. In Senegal, we have the issue of wild waste dumping, and which has a nefarious impact on the environment. We have about 2 million tons of waste, and less than 5% are recycled or adequately collected. So we also have institutional challenges in the African countries. Sometimes there is an overlap in terms of sidestepping between the governments and local governments that are involved in the management of waste. The other thing is inadequate financial resources, which is impeding our local governments and governments, and the collection rate is quite erratic and quite low. We also have inadequate capacities on the part of the institutions and the local governments. And of course, to that, we have to add the inadequate competencies from a human perspective, human resource perspective for an efficient management of waste. In terms of the stakes, today, we have to own up to the fact that our countries, especially in Africa, are witnessing a very robust urbanization. We have a very swift urbanization with the demographic explosion. And also, we also have shifts in consumer behavior, which has an impact. One of those impacts is the impact on the environment as a result of the evolving consumer behavior, and which results into an increase in the volume, in the quantity of waste. And we have various types of plastics. There are plastic matter or littering. Today, the issue of waste doesn't have to be considered as just an environmental challenge, but we have to make it fully part and parcel of the economic challenges. We have to move to shift from waste management to waste economy, because there is a potential to harness the value, economic value from waste in order to create or generate wealth for our cities, and have wealth that can be shared among our cities and help to garner and create employment for the youth, for the citizens. And this can help the authorities to really, by shifting the paradigm to harness, how will I say that? But what I mean is we don't have to consider, we have to shift from considering waste from the perspective of management of waste, but rather shift to the economic, getting economic value from the waste, which I refer to as waste economy. This is the first thing. In my mind, we have to foster on the part of governments and policymakers a will to hammer out management systems we have to indeed have a global, we have to think global, even though we have to act local. This is an equation that we need to deal with, and by creating a synergy or symbiosis between the government and the local governments, by actually allowing, trickling down that government ambition to the local communities. In terms of challenges, the challenges are, first of all, we have to imbibe the challenges from the perspective of sustainable development. We have to also safeguard sustainable funding so that those involved in academic work on waste management and practical management should have adequate resources, and we have to empower the local governments. We have to empower local governments, and under the steering of the government of the state has to be involved. Someone was saying that the less of government we have or more government we have, when the government is taking ownership and empowering the local governments, things work out smoothly. We have to get into a situation of a symbiosis between the government and local governments, and we cannot make headway without the involvement of the private sector. The private sector has to be fully onboarded to support the leveraging of resources by the government, especially from the investment perspective. And all this requires a holistic approach, a holistic and a systemic approach, and an all-inclusive approach based on participation of all. And to sum up, we have to leverage all of these on a holistic and a systemic approach based on an inclusive and participatory approach. The first way to circumvent these challenges is by providing a financial and legal reform. We have regulations both locally and internationally that have to provide a conducive environment. We have to provide an adequate framing of the activities related to waste management. We have provided funding to increase the performance of those involved in the collection in such a way as to foster the cost effectiveness of waste management and make it a profitable endeavor. And also we need to build a market economy, an economy that will be centered on waste management and collection. There is an economic potential that needs to be, that is just awaiting to be harnessed. And that is likely to have an impact on our communities. We also need to strengthen the local government's capabilities to manage waste. And that has to go through a participatory, inclusive, and accountability-based management type of waste that will involve the communities and every stakeholder that have a stake in the management of waste. And everyone has to be held accountable. And this is paramount. We have to imbibe these principles which will allow everyone to play his role and contribute. And it is the summation of these, the sum of these contributions, multiplying effect of these contributions that will help us to make headway and have a management that will therefore participatory and which will culminate in the hammering out of action plans that will help us to sustain governance. So these strategies, I try to break down this strategy into action plan, into action items. It is paramount for the governments to have a mechanism that will be a full-fledged mechanism in terms of strategies and regulations. We need to have a consistent approach between and all of the stakeholders need to be on the same page, have the same level of commitment and devotion by participating in the hammering out of an inclusive national strategy, which is going to be broken down into legislation. We also need to ensure an optimal sharing of roles and responsibilities between the government, the local governments, and civil society. We need to define in a clear manner the levels of responsibilities and roles. And this is the Achilles heel when it comes to accountability within between the government and the various ministries and the civil society, and of course local governments. Sometimes there is a conflicting relationship when it comes to the allocation of roles. But we also need to put in place a co-funding mechanism between the government and the local governments, because the local governments do not necessarily have the means. And there are instances where the governments are lacking in terms of resources. So we have to strike a balance in terms of participation on the part of the government and local governments. And there is an imperative for a dialogue to ensure that the government and local governments work hand in hand. And of course, we need to have, as one of the catalysts, the community's participation through tax and tax or taxation to support these waste management. And in the case of Senegal, we're talking about potentially 2 billion CFA, and only 10% can be collected from the households. And also, we have to broaden the responsibility of those involved in the industries, the production, and the manufacturing. They have to be brought on board when it comes to footing the bill for the management of waste in general and plastic waste in particular. We have to ensure that they are involved, that those companies involved in the production and manufacturing are involved. In terms of waste economy, our local governments have to have mechanisms and the machinery and the equipment, the technical means, and that will call for the involvement of private sector through private-public partnerships. We have to also promote the waste markets through regulatory and incentives, regulatory mechanisms and incentives. Today, for instance, we have everything related to waste. It should be geared toward feeding a market. So if we are able to develop and promote a market for plastic waste, that will help to have a qualitative leap. And this calls for regulation and incentives. We have to be able to provide an impetus for the structural transformation, structural and gradual incremental transformation of our informal waste economics. There is an existing informal waste economy that calls for restructuring to provide the sector with capacities to enable it to play its role. We also need to support the local governments and municipalities in terms of planning, in terms of setting up local planning for waste management. That has to be defined to allow the local governments to effectively and efficiently manage waste. That has to be, we have to take on board the socio-economic factors and mostly the economic determinant, which means that we should have in place a mechanism that should reflect the local and cultural values. We have to adjust all this planning effort. We have to adjust that to the local behavior on the part of the communities. And we have to identify investment programs. And on that basis, we should be able to beef up the capacities of those involved, both from the perspective of organizational and logistic capacities of the local governments, either in Senegal or in Côte d'Ivoire. We can see that things are moving. We see burgeoning strategies that I was privileged to work on the master plan of one of the cities. So I can understand that the local governments and policymakers are beginning to imbibe all these imperatives. In terms of these needs, action items, we need to strengthen the capacities of each of the stakeholders by strengthening their capacities. And it is also paramount to raise the sense of accountability and also create crafts in the area or linked to the management of waste. And that has to go through vocational training into areas that can provide opportunities for the territorial local governments and the governments to have manpower to support the waste management. We also need to foster environmental education or awareness of the children, of our children, to make them ambassadors. And we have to achieve this through awareness raising in our academic institutions and schools and high schools. But you also have to roll out social marketing programs for a citizen commitment and the adoption of accountable or eco-friendly or eco-sensitive behaviors. There is a part that falls on the accountability of the households, because they have to sort the waste and that falls on the shoulders of the citizens to some extent. So they have to be able to gauge their level of responsibility and accountability and fully play their role. And of course, you cannot plan without data and you cannot assess without data. So we need to have adequate data to be able to carry out data analysis or data review. And that has to be pegged to an M&E mechanism to be able to take remedial action when necessary. And that will culminate into a performing governance, which is the problem in most of our countries is data inadequacy or issues pertinent to the integrity or availability of data. We need to have data that is available, that is accessible, that is reliable to help us take stock. And today we are talking about the implementation of action plans, and these cannot be envisaged without data. We have data on the waste production, plastic data production, data on the recycled waste. We have data on the various stakeholders and their activities and level of commitments, and everyone is to be involved, is to come on board, and it is through the joint accountability that we will make headway in terms of waste management. On this note, I would like to say a big thank you for your kindness, attention, and feel free to pitch in or ask questions or make comments. Thank you.
Je redonne la parole pour les questions.
Merci, Ibrahima. Thank you so much for your presentation. There have been some questions that have come through in the Q&A box so long. I trust that that Sonali can hear me and translate this. So there have been some questions that have come through. The first is what is the role of NGOs in the municipal waste management, and are NGOs involved as stakeholders in the process with municipal waste management? Can you comment on that in Senegal?
OK, merci beaucoup. Effectivement, les ONG ont un rôle essentiel. Nous, dans la présentation, on les a intégrés dans la...
Of course, in my paper, where I mentioned civil society organizations, that is where the NGOs come in. The NGOs have to help the communities basically in terms of awareness raising. And that awareness raising falls within the purview and rests on the shoulders of the NGOs in terms of helping the local communities to understand the stakes involved in waste management, and also the NGOs have to be allowed to play a role in fostering behavioral change, and there are social influencers. They have to play a role in social transformation of the population. So they have their role will never be overestimated with regard to the steps to be taken to foster behavioral change. In a nutshell, the NGOs have a paramount role to play in terms of supporting awareness raising.
Merci, Ibrahima. There's another question that's translated from French that says, are there 5 main strategic axes already applicable? If so, what are the advantages and the difficulties encountered?
Les principaux axes sont vraiment
applicables. The main axes, the main pillars can be implemented, applicable in Senegal. We are able to define these strategic axes. So these are not strategic axes that were unilaterally decided upon, but they were based on a situational analysis. And this was a result of analysis of it's based on a consensus, and this is something that is quite feasible. All of these action items are realistic, they are feasible. Today, one of these axes is a legal reform, and that falls on the shoulders of the governments. There have to be a willingness to shift the lines, to shift the paradigm. And therefore, there is a possibility to implement. We have the Environmental Act or Code. So there is, or this is a leap in the right direction. Of course, in terms of funding mechanism, this is one of the loopholes, but I know it's no easy task having to being able to collect taxation, to impose taxation on local communities or whatever. But this is no easy task. None of these action items is an easy one. And that is why I buttress the relevance of the NGOs to raise awareness among the communities, among the grassroots communities, because it is no gainsaying that the local governments do not have the means to foot the bill. We have to play a role. Everyone has to play his role. These are things that are also realistic and rich. And now, in terms of the implementation of the institutes, and there is a process going on in Senegal and elsewhere. With the support of technical and financial partners, we have about 200 billion with regard to Senegal that is being leveraged. So this is all about identifying the various states and engaging the technical and financial partners. So of course, there are challenges, which is we need to be able to build the infrastructure and engage in a sort of bargaining with the local governments to share the footing the bill with regard to waste management and collection. So we need to have people that are adequately trained and have the strengths and capacities to manage these mechanisms. And we need to also have an inventory of needs. And that has to be founded to rest on the strong and dynamic commitment on the part of the governments and local governments and communities. Thank you. I hope.
Merci. There's another question that says, as the final stage of a product's lifespan, incineration is opposed by many people, and it's not an environmentally friendly option. Do you have a solution to this?
That comes under, in terms of the value addition or incineration, what we recommend is all about having a technology that is conducive, that is adapted. You need to prioritize the issue of waste. We have a reduction of waste, and then we have processing. Today, we need to adjust the workarounds to the realities on the ground. In Senegal, for instance, potentially 50% of the waste cannot be incinerated. So we need to get into what I call characterization of the waste. And that has to be done through awareness raising, to allow the communities to understand the various levels and various types of waste that will culminate into providing guidelines and drafting guidelines, because of course we're not going to be able to harness the energetic power from all waste. This is to say that today there is no one size fits all. We have to look for the most adapted, most suitable technology that reflects, that takes into account the type of the waste and also the economic capacities of the household, because incineration can be cost prohibitive, and the technology, we have to find stakeholders that will foot the bill when it comes to making available the technology.
Merci.
Merci, Ibrahima. There's a question from Barbara here that says, thank you so much. When you speak about access and availability of quality data, what are the best practices that you have seen in your work that can be leveraged and replicated? Does Senegal have examples?
Okay,
well, in terms of data, I think this is very, very crucial. I think in Senegal, what we did is putting in place a full-fledged territorial database, a mechanism for waste management. So we went from, this is in a partnership with with experts in geographic information systems, the GIS. So we were able to hire about 12 experts, GIS experts, and that are working across the country to collect data and to help analyze the data. And that has helped us to ensure a mapping. We have a mapping of the wild dumping sites and landfills, and we have that data is available. That data is available. We also map the collection networks. So we did the effort. We made the effort of at least starting from mapping, and then that serves as a foundation to update a mechanism for the management of these of the waste. Today, we want to be able to have systems, open-ended systems that will be managed by waste managers, as we call them here, that will feed data into the database. So that calls for intensive resources, and as I said, but what we're doing at the moment is working with these GIS experts that are making available data, and that data, that information is available and is accessible and is reliable. That is what Senegal has been doing. Thank you.
Merci.
Merci, Ibrahima. There's another question here from Barbara that says, and to add to the data question, which institutions are the best positioned to collect and share this?
Ça c'est ce que je viens de répondre.
That's more or less what I've just said. I think there is the key challenges, competencies, because waste management cuts across several areas, is multidisciplinary. When I was appointed as head of the coordination unit, I realized that I had to set up a multidisciplinary team. We have computer specialists, computer scientists that roll down the information systems, and we have people that are involved in data collection and waste, also those involved in sociology. We had to hire surveyors to investigate and collect data. We also have experts, technicians, as they're called. But this is a multidisciplinary team that I spearheaded. And we also have to work out terms of reference, and there has to be, we have to have people that will monitor the social indicators, economic indicators, and that warrants putting in place a multidisciplinary team. You need to have that as a foundation to support the collection, the data collection proper.
Merci. Merci. D'autres questions?
Oh, sorry. So sorry about that. Thank you so much for your answer. There's another question here in the chat that says, thank you for this rich presentation. There is one point that concerns me. You said that only 2 billion out of 20 are collected annually in Dakar as municipal taxes. Is this just the tax for waste management? What explains this low collection rate? And what solutions do you recommend to increase the collection rates, especially for municipal teams that must also think about the next election? That question is in the chat box in both French and English.
Donc effectivement,
as a matter of fact, the collection rate is quite low in our local governments and municipalities. And as I said, in my paper, the waste management has not reached a level of priority which has to be done. And this calls for a political will and commitment. The policymakers have to commit themselves to, the policies, and then you have to, because the waste collection comes with a price tag. You need to ensure the maintenance, the hiring of people involved, and the fuel, and you need to plan, you need a planning mechanism, and then implementation mechanisms and all that. So all in all, this boils down to footing the bill. There is always a price tag attached to each of these things. And it's one of the challenges because the financial resources are just not adequate. And in our municipalities, there is this inadequacy of resources. And so most of the times, these issues of waste management are not ranked as a priority, and which explain the low collection rate. And there is also a laissez-faire, which is like there is no monitoring, and the people are just doing what they want to do, and which results in the what I call wild dumping sites and landfills. So it all boils down to prioritizing and giving more, a priority to the issue of waste management.
Thank you, Ibrahima. There's some more comments here that have come through and said this is a very rich presentation, and thank you. And then there's another question from Abdullah that says, do you have an indication of the budget for the waste management system mapping work that you described, using GIS and all that for the data gathering?
La question est écrite aussi en français.
You have the question in English. If you can't hear, do you have an idea about the cost of the mapping of the GIS system that you mentioned? How much in terms of cost? Do you have any idea about the cost? That's the question. It's available in both languages.
Bon, je l'ai expliqué. Donc,
well, as I explained, there's the mechanism that is put in place. That is the time when I was the coordinator of the team. That system was implemented, and we have to be able to project salaries, the payroll, and we were having a full-time staff, and people needed to have logistics in terms of transportation, and also to get their means to purchase GPRS-based equipment. So today we have a platform, and once the needs are identified, but I cannot offhand, I don't have any figures readily available that I can share with you. But I know we need have resources for the hiring of personnel and the acquisition of equipment and of these data scientists. And in Senegal, we divided into several teams, and we have experts that were in various areas to lead the teams. And today, we have quite a satisfactory results. And this is what helped us to get funding. Because in Senegal, we have reliable data that help to characterize on a national basis. We were able to mobilize 5 engineers that went around Senegal and helped to draft the map, to help with the mapping. So today we have mapping, we have data from that mapping exercise. So this is a work that calls for patience, is work, it is a limitless work because it's about collecting data that will culminate into programming, and you need mapping data, and of course, ultimately, on the basis of this data, you can formulate, because the national program for waste management in Senegal was based. It is we were able to help to come up with an ambitious program, which we shared with the technical and financial partners. And today, we do have a World Bank that has made a commitment with Islamic Development Bank and even the European Union that are all committed to funding, providing the funding of 200 million. So data can take you very far. Once you have a good mastery of your situation, you can validly reach out to others and have them reach out. And today, we have results that we are proud of, and we have a good command of the situation on the ground in terms of data. But maybe we could share the statistic, our data with you. That was done, that has been done professionally, and we could disseminate that with you if you think that is opportune.
Thank you, Ibrahima. There's another question here that's come through in French that says, what are the responsibilities of local authorities in waste collection? For example, town halls and such.
Donc, bon, en tout cas, sur la législation.
Well, in terms of the legislation, for most of the countries in Africa and elsewhere, the waste management rests on the shoulders of the municipalities and local governments. They have, it is under their purview. Data collection is a routine task for them. Collecting data, transporting data, this all falls within the purview. Now, that is what we have cast in stone, but now we have some exceptions. In Dakar, for instance, the government has mandated the local governments to, I know in Senegal, the government came in to substitute itself. In Côte d'Ivoire, we have Nadages, and so these are linked to, these are sequel to some deficiencies, but not normally under the best circumstances, the local governments and municipalities should be responsible as a first resource. But of course, we do have exceptions, or otherwise the local governments have to put the bill, they have to take the steps to impose taxation on waste management, waste collection, and the collection today in Senegal. We have a legal framework. That is why we press for legal reforms, because taxation and collecting the taxation, we have that act, that bill goes back to 1972. So we had to revamp all these instruments. In addition to that, there is a centralization. So it's the government that today is collecting the taxation or imposing the taxation, and that is in charge of the tax collection. That is why they are in charge, more or less, they are taking the bulk in terms of waste collection. But as I said, today, we have that is, in Senegal, there is a survey that has been commandeered to see how to reconsider all these elements. Both, especially from the collection perspective. And we have to find a way of dividing of replicating the cost, for instance, on the light bills. And so bearing in mind that there is a better and improved performance in the collection of waste management. We did carry out a study, and the municipality was able to collect the data. The only
Par contre, 19 millions de francs CFA.
19 million, 19 million, roughly 38,000 in the from the households. Besides, the community people that are using chariots are able to collect over 100 million CFA, roughly $200,000, which means 5 times more or as much. So today, we need to create that trust between the populations and authorities. Sometimes the households do not want to pay because they are fearing a misuse of the funds. So you have to foster trust between the local communities and the governments. And that boils down to promoting, fostering accountability. Thank you. Just a glimpse for those who are not familiar with what we're saying. This is for the translation. 90 million is about 30,000 euros. Just for you to have a perspective, for Kaolack is about 1 million inhabitants, right? Kaolack, yes. You know, this is a city of about 1 million inhabitants. We are barely able to collect the equivalent of 30,000 euros. That is just to help. At the time when the community agents were collecting 5 more, or 5 times as much.
Thank you for that. Sorry, I just wanted to check that I was speaking in the correct room. Thank you so much for all the answers that you've been giving us. You mentioned the need for environmental education in order to try and fight pollution and that. Can you comment on whether environmental issues are covered in the school curriculum in Senegal at the moment?
Well, in terms of integrating or mainstreaming issues in the curricula, there is a long way to go. Of course, the government, the policymakers have imbibed the need, and the state, we did work on the issue of characterization of data and the crafts related involved, or the professions or business lines involved in waste management. So we're working towards promoting the vocational training. We do have partnerships with the training to see how we can mainstream in the curricula the issue of sustainable development, environmental management, waste management. So we are really making people beginning. We are right at the beginning stages, and we're making the effort to deploy these issues into the curricula. We advocated for having clubs, environmental clubs in the various schools. We have the academics, unfortunately, we realize that in our higher education institutions, the engineers have no knowledge of some of these issues. So there's more and more the integration of mainstreaming of these issues such as waste management in the curricula. we are urging institutions to have programs on environmental measures on environmental sciences, related sciences, and mainstreaming that into the curricula. We support the government currently. We have up to 3 engineers that are being trained, and some getting a payoring. And we have one that is doing a PhD on and myself. I'm working at the University of Thiès on waste management. And for cement factories, for instance. So we try to push for the inclusion in research topics as well. And we have a training higher vocational training institute that is going to be in Baki, and they will be teaching the crafts or professions related to environment and the waste management. So that speaks volume of the fact that the government and the policymakers have imbibed the imperative to push the agenda in terms of these curricula. Thank you.
Thank you, Ibrahima. There's another question here in the chat box, which I'll try to answer live. It says, it is true that the notion of good governance in the management of finances at the municipal level, because sometimes the misappropriation of funds undermines certain processes initiated by our government. Would you like to comment on that, Ibrahima?
Excusez-moi, avant qu'il ne réponde, je vais encore demander au traducteur si c'est possible de vérifier l'outil parce que ça fait depuis 30 minutes la qualité du son. Pardon? Alors oui, non, mais c'est la qualité du son. C'est ce qui s'est passé les jours précédents, ça revient encore. Donc c'est juste pour vérifier. Oui, là, ça va. Ça va mieux, pourvu que ça dure. Merci. Merci. Merci.
Yes, we can go. Can go on. Thank you. Thank you very much. I think that in the strategy, governance, performing governance is a key issue in terms from the perspective of sustainable development. Beyond environment, social environment, the governance is a crucial issue, and is even the foundation, I must say. Good governance is the foundation, is the pillar. If we do not have good governance, we cannot make headway. The entire foundation will crumble. So in the reforms, I think we are making good governance. We are giving preeminence to good governance, to the need for good governance. This is absolutely true. Good governance and governance cuts across everything in terms of the data. You have to have transparent and verifiable, incredible data. That you have data governance as well. So good governance in the recruitment and the hiring of personnel, and based on the competencies for the management of these of waste in local governments, we have to recruit the best personnel. That calls for governance, good governance as well. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Ibrahima. I don't see any more questions in the Q&A box or in the chat, but if anyone has any questions at a later stage, please feel free to send those through to us and we will pass them along to Ibrahima. Just to, before we close off, I just had one other question. Is there a market for informal collectors in Senegal? I know in South Africa and I think in quite a few countries, there will be sort of informal collectors who collect recyclable items and sell them to buyback centers. Is that the case in Senegal? My apologies if I missed that in your presentation.
Effectivement, c'est la même situation.
Yes, we live in the same situation. That is why I began my paper on you have on the background. I provided a background. If you remember what I said in my background, you will understand that the same situation in Senegal. We have informal collectors in the local governments. And in fact, most of the work is by informal collectors. There are entire municipalities where the whole system is resting on informal collectors using wheelbarrows and what have you. And at the end of the month, they come and they collect money from these households. And that system, as I said, is more efficacious because of the trust that the communities repose more confidence and trust in these wheelbarrow carriers and collectors of waste rather than the government collectors. And in Senegal, these informal collectors are the bulk of the collectors. Now, in terms of value addition and recycling, we have the collection level, the collection of recyclable waste, and we have the trading or marketing by the wholesalers, and the whole collection part is of recyclables. Recyclables is by informal collectors. They are in charge of collecting the main material. We have these itinerant collectors that go from door to door to collect the waste. Or the communities, these collectors go to the wild dumping sites and collect whatever needs to be collected from there. And then they sell to wholesalers that will sell to those that are involved in manufacturing or recycling. So this is the situation, the picture in Senegal. So the shortest answer is that the informal collectors are the bulk of the collection agents. We need to have that informal economy, and we need to sustain it and make it more performing. I do believe that these informal collectors are quite relevant. We need to support them. You need to structure them. We need to capacitate them. We need to ensure. We need to provide. The governments need to provide a strong cohesion between the formal and the informal sector by supporting the informal collectors. Thank you.
Thank you, Ibrahima. My apologies for missing that part. There don't seem to be any other questions in the Q&A or in the chat, but as we mentioned earlier, please feel free to email those to us and we will pass those along. You can send those to webinars@sstafrica.org.za. Otherwise, I think we can close things off here for today. Thank you so much, Ibrahima, on behalf of SST and the Abidjan Convention. It was really wonderful to hear your presentation and hear all your expertise and the sorry, I see you've sent a message in the chat, and to hear the perspective that you have from Senegal. We really appreciate the time that you've taken to speak with us today. Sorry, I'm just translating this as we go. But thank you so much. It's been wonderful to hear, and I completely agree with so much of what you said in terms of there isn't a blanket solution for all of the issues relating to plastic waste, and each country needs to find the best option for them. I think we can look at closing off here. I'm not sure if anyone else would like to chime in before we close off.
Ibrahima, I'd like to also thank you on behalf of or Abdullah is going to thank you from the Abidjan Convention in a moment. But I found your talk superb. We totally agree that a multidisciplinary approach is absolutely essential. And we also, well, from my perspective, I was so impressed by the emphasis you placed on accountability. But thank you very, very much indeed. A wonderful presentation, very informative and most encouraging because of the positive steps that you are taking in Senegal. So well done and thank you.
Merci beaucoup, Tony.
Thank you very much, Tony.
Thank you to Tara and everybody. Vraiment, Ibrahima.
Indeed, Ibrahim, we had a good intuition. We were well inspired by inviting you because, as you said, the subsidiarity principle calls for issues to be resolved at the level of the issue itself. And here, as part of this process of elaboration of a legal framework for the Abidjan Convention in terms of waste management, we really we had a very broad. I think we're getting nigh the end of our webinars, and it is very relevant and useful to those that are involved. You did really make a good job of describing the challenges related to collection of waste in our countries. And the challenges with regard to leveraging the means, the resources, and the trucks that are only used for data collection when they are too old to be used elsewhere, they are obsolete. And there is also the issue of prioritizing and recruiting the adequate staffing. Did do a fantastic job of describing all of that. And as I wrote to you in your inbox, that provides an avenue for us to see the imperative to reach out to technicians that have field hands-on experience with these issues. And we want to say, indeed, more grace to your elbows. And you did provide insight that some of these can be threatening. Out of 2 billion, we only collect 2 billion. This is frightening. And this is a missed opportunity because the local governments probably will have to foot the bill to a large extent. Now, Tony, Tara, and everyone from the Abidjan Convention, we will be receiving the officials. This is the time if we can have people from Abidjan, Nouakchott, Dakar, as part on this panel is going to be quite eye-opening. And with the support on the UN environment and the Abidjan Convention in EU and Sustainable Seas Trust, a big, big, big thank you. Hats off.
Thank you so much, everyone. I think we'll close the session here for today. And we really, really appreciate all the time and effort you took to speak to us today, Ibrahima. Merci beaucoup. We will have another session on Tuesday, which will be the 4th of May, and we look forward to having you all there with us. Thank you so much, everyone, and I hope you enjoy the rest of your afternoon.